So, Sophie Cunningham, it happened again. The WNBA have fined her again.
Well, the WNBA fined me for
nose.
What if you got fined, not for what you did on the court, but simply for telling the truth about it? Not for throwing a punch, not for a dirty play, not for shoving another player, but for a 10-second TikTok that the entire internet found completely harmless. That's exactly what happened to Sophie Cunningham. And what started as a $500 fine has now exploded into one of the most damaging controversies the WNBA has faced in recent memory. Fans are livid. Players are talking behind closed doors. National media is circling like sharks. And the league? It looks completely unprepared for what it unleashed. Here's the question nobody in the league offices wants to answer. Was Sophie actually out of line? Or did she just say what every player, fan, and analyst had already been thinking for years? Before we get into it, I want you to drop a fire in the comments if you think players should have the right to speak freely. Because by the end of this video, your opinion on the WNBA might never be the same again. This is Simply Explained. Let's get into it.
You guys, there was this TikTok that Sophie Cunningham came up where she is lip syncing a Sabrina Carpenter song where she's kind of calling out the referees. It's just like a fun little TikTok that she did. It's literally 10 seconds long. And she commented on top of the TikTok and she said, "at some refs." And then she posted this on her other social media pages saying, "I got fined $500 for this TikTok. I don't know why this is funny to me." Like, okay, gotcha, bud. Because there's not more important things to be worried about with our league right now.
It didn't start with a press conference. There was no dramatic locker room speech, no heated sideline confrontation caught on camera, no explosive post-game interview that sent journalists scrambling. It started with a TikTok, 10 seconds long. After a game loaded with questionable officiating decisions, Sophie Cunningham did what millions of people do every single day. She posted a short, playful video. She lip-synced to a Sabrina Carpenter song, captioned it with "at some refs," and moved on with her day. The whole thing was lighthearted, almost funny. The kind of content that gets a few laughs, maybe a couple thousand views, and disappears into the algorithm within 48 hours. Except it didn't disappear, because the WNBA was watching. Within days, the league handed Sophie a $500 fine. No warning, no conversation. Just a financial penalty for a video that contained zero profanity, zero direct insults, and zero threatening language. Just a woman and a Sabrina Carpenter song expressing frustration in the most modern, low-key way possible. And fans lost it. Not because $500 is a life-changing amount of money for a professional athlete, but because of what the punishment represented. It felt heavy-handed. It felt reactive. And more than anything, it felt like the league was sending a message rather than addressing any real issue. Think about what was happening on the court at the same time. Players were taking hard contact. Questionable calls were stacking up. Fans watching at home and in the stands were already grumbling about officiating consistency. These weren't isolated moments. This was a pattern that had been building across multiple games and multiple seasons. And Sophie, like many others, had clearly had enough. But here's what's fascinating. Sophie's TikTok wasn't born from nowhere. It was the result of sitting through one too many moments where the whistle either came too late, went to the wrong team, or didn't come at all. Anyone who had been watching closely understood exactly what she was referencing with that caption. It wasn't mysterious. It wasn't coded. It was simply honest. And the league punished her for it. Now, fines for criticizing officials aren't exactly new territory in professional sports. Most major leagues have rules against publicly challenging referees. It's standard stuff. But the speed and intensity of this particular response raised eyebrows immediately. No grace period. No quiet conversation. Just a swift $500 penalty that landed publicly and loudly. What the league didn't account for was Sophie's personality. Because Sophie Cunningham is not the type of player who quietly accepts something she believes is unfair. She's vocal. She's direct. She's the kind of athlete who will look a situation straight in the eye and refuse to blink first. So instead of going quiet, she did the one thing the WNBA probably should have anticipated, but clearly didn't. She kept talking, and what she said next would cost her a whole lot more than $500. Most players in Sophie's position would have taken the fine, stayed quiet, and waited for the noise to die down. Sophie Cunningham is not most players. Rather than retreating, she sat down on her podcast and did something remarkably simple. She explained herself. No theatrics, no dramatic declarations, just an honest, measured breakdown of why she was frustrated and what she believed the league was getting wrong. She even went out of her way to acknowledge the difficulty of officiating. She said, clearly and on record, that referees have one of the hardest jobs in sports, that she respects the ones doing it well, that she isn't sitting here pretending every call is easy to make in real time. But then she asked a question that cut right through all of that nuance. What are you doing when a straightforward call right in front of you is repeatedly missed? 7 words that the WNBA apparently couldn't let slide. Because not long after that episode aired, the fines came again. Reports indicate the second round of penalties hit $1,500, triple the original fine, pushing her total across multiple incidents to roughly $2,000. The league had escalated, significantly, and it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about how Sophie found out. According to her own account on the podcast, her general manager didn't pull her into a private office for a quiet conversation. Instead, Sophie says she was addressed in front of her teammates, in front of the group. The fine was communicated in a setting that felt, to many listeners, less like a professional correction and more like a public example being made. Let that sink in for a second. A player acknowledges the difficulty of a job, offers measured criticism of its execution, and receives a financial penalty delivered in front of her entire team, as if to make sure everyone else in that locker room got the message too. That's not discipline, that's a demonstration. And it didn't work. Because the moment Sophie shared that story publicly, the reaction wasn't sympathy for the league. It was outrage directed at it. Fans who had been passively irritated became actively vocal. People who hadn't followed the original TikTok story were suddenly deeply invested in this one. The podcast episodes in question saw their play counts climb dramatically, not despite the fines, but directly because of them. The WNBA had tried to contain a small fire with a bucket of gasoline. And here's what makes it even more difficult to defend. Sophie wasn't performing for an audience. She wasn't building a brand around controversy or manufacturing drama for clicks and engagement. She was simply telling her story, explaining her experience, doing what any reasonable person does when they believe they've been treated unfairly, talking about it. The league's response told everyone watching exactly what kind of communication it was willing to tolerate. And fans were about to make their feelings on that crystal clear. The moment Sophie's fines became public knowledge, the internet didn't debate whether to respond. It just responded. Within hours, hashtags supporting Sophie began trending. Social media timelines were flooded with clips from her podcast, screenshots of the original TikTok, and commentary from fans who had clearly been waiting for exactly this kind of flashpoint to voice frustrations that had been building for months. But what happened next surprised even the most passionate supporters. GoFundMe pages appeared almost immediately, not organized by any official campaign or coordinated group, but launched spontaneously by individual fans who simply wanted to do something tangible. The money needed to cover Sophie's fines was raised in a matter of hours, not days, hours. Thousands of people, many of whom had likely never attended a WNBA game in person, contributed because they felt the principle mattered. Then came the petitions. Thousands of signatures piled up on calls for officiating transparency and reform in the WNBA. These weren't fan accounts with small followings running niche campaigns. These were broad, fast-moving responses from a community that felt genuinely unheard by the league it was supposed to trust. And then something ironic and entirely predictable to anyone who understands how information spreads happened. Sophie's podcast downloads surged. The very episodes the WNBA seemed to want buried became required listening. People who had never heard Sophie Cunningham's name before were suddenly seeking out her exact words. Journalists started pulling quotes. Commentators started weighing in. What was supposed to be a contained disciplinary issue had become a full-blown national conversation about free expression in professional sports. This is the Streisand effect in action, the well-documented phenomenon where attempts to suppress or punish information only served to amplify it to a far larger audience than it ever would have reached on its own. The WNBA walked directly into this trap. But underneath all the noise, there was a specific frustration that kept rising to the surface. Fans weren't just angry about Sophie. They were angry about what her situation seemed to represent, a league that moves quickly to fine a player for words, while appearing far slower to act on physical incidents happening on the actual court. And that brought one name into the center of everything: Caitlin Clark. Clips of Clark absorbing contact that many felt should have drawn stronger responses began circulating alongside discussions of Sophie's fines. The contrast was stark, at least in the eyes of the fans sharing those videos. Here was the league's most talked about star, targeted repeatedly across 2 seasons, and here was a player being fined multiple times for a podcast conversation. Whether or not that comparison is entirely fair, the perception had already taken hold. And in sports, like in politics, like in business, perception becomes reality faster than any press release can correct it. The double standard conversation had officially begun, and it was about to get much louder. For 2 consecutive seasons, a specific pattern has been discussed, sometimes quietly, sometimes explosively among WNBA fans, analysts, and even former players. Caitlin Clark gets hit hard often. Blindside contact, aggressive physical plays, moments that left viewers rewinding footage and asking serious questions about intent and accountability. Some incidents resulted in minor disciplinary action. Others, according to fans tracking every call, seemed to pass without any meaningful consequence at all. One specific moment that circulated widely involved Marina Mabrey delivering what many described as a vicious blindside hit. Another involved DJ Carrington in a play that came dangerously close to Clark's eye. Both incidents sparked heated debate. Both, in the eyes of many supporters, deserved stronger league responses than they received. Now, let's be precise here. Basketball is a physical sport. Contact is constant. Officiating decisions involve split-second human judgment, and reasonable people can disagree about what crosses the line. Not every hard foul is malicious. Not every penalty decision is wrong simply because fans disagree with it. But here's where the perception problem becomes a real problem. When fans watch Sophie Cunningham get fined multiple times, quickly, publicly, and escalatingly, for podcast commentary and a harmless TikTok, while simultaneously watching incidents involving Clark feel like they move through the disciplinary process slowly or quietly, a narrative forms. That narrative is, words are punished faster than actions. And once that narrative is in the air, it spreads. Comment sections, sports radio, YouTube discussions, Twitter threads, everywhere people talk about basketball, that comparison was being made in the weeks following Sophie's fines. What made it worse was the nature of Sophie's criticism. She wasn't making personal attacks. She wasn't targeting individual referees by name. She acknowledged the difficulty of their job. She praised the ones doing it well. And she asked a measured, legitimate question about repeated missed calls. For that, she received escalating financial penalties and a public dressing down in front of her team. Meanwhile, incidents on the court involving one of the league's biggest stars felt, at least to the vocal portion of the fan base, like they were handled with far less urgency. The gap between those 2 realities is where resentment grows. And resentment, left unaddressed, doesn't fade, it compounds. Former players and analysts began weighing in, pointing out that this kind of perceived inconsistency is exactly what erodes a league's credibility with casual fans, the very audience the WNBA needs to grow. Long-term supporters tolerate a lot. But new fans, people who came to the league through Caitlin Clark's rise, were watching how the WNBA handled controversy for the first time. What they saw didn't inspire confidence. It raised questions. And those questions led directly to uncomfortable comparisons with other leagues. Leagues that seemed to handle criticism, dissent, and player expression in a fundamentally different way. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Let's talk about the NBA for a second. Draymond Green has built an entire media career on saying exactly what he thinks, loudly and without much filter. Charles Barkley, one of the most celebrated voices in basketball history, spent decades criticizing players, coaches, teams, officiating, and league decisions without ever being systematically silenced. Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Smith, countless others built platforms around blunt, sometimes controversial honesty. And the league didn't just tolerate it, it celebrated it. Because that kind of authentic, unfiltered personality is what makes sports feel real. It creates connection. It gives fans someone to rally around, agree with, argue against. It makes the league feel alive rather than corporate and controlled. The NFL operates similarly. When the infamous 2019 playoff no-call in the Saints game became one of the biggest officiating controversies in sports history, players, coaches, and analysts spoke about it openly and extensively. The conversation was loud, sometimes brutal, and entirely public. Nobody was systematically penalized for expressing frustration. Now look at what happened to Sophie Cunningham. She posted a playful 10-second video. She went on her podcast and offered measured, even-handed criticism. She acknowledged the difficulty of officiating while asking a legitimate question about consistency. She was polite. She was reasonable. She gave credit where she felt it was due. And she was fined, repeatedly, publicly, with escalating financial penalties each time she spoke. The contrast between these two environments isn't subtle, it's dramatic. What makes it even more frustrating to Sophie's supporters is that her criticism wasn't even particularly harsh by professional sports standards. Athletes in virtually every major league say far more pointed things about officiating on a weekly basis, in post-game press conferences, on podcasts, in interviews on social media, without facing the kind of swift, stacking penalties Sophie received. It raises a legitimate structural question. Is the WNBA applying standards that other leagues abandoned long ago? And if so, why? Because here's what tighter speech controls actually produce in the long run. They don't eliminate frustration. They just push it underground. Players stop speaking publicly, but the conversations happen in locker rooms, in group chats, in quiet interviews where comments are carefully hedged and sanitized of anything real. That's not authenticity, that's performance. And fans, especially younger fans, who can detect inauthenticity from a mile away, lose interest when the human element disappears from the stories they're following. Sophie Cunningham, on her podcast, talking honestly about what she was experiencing, was giving fans something genuine. A real look at what it feels like to play in this league, navigate its pressures, and bump up against its authority structures. That's valuable content. That's the kind of storytelling that builds loyal audiences. And the league fined her for it, which, combined with everything else happening around this story at the same time, was about to attract a level of media attention the WNBA was entirely unprepared for. Here's where the timeline becomes genuinely uncomfortable for the league. Sophie's fines didn't happen in isolation. They didn't occur during some quiet stretch where the WNBA was flying under the radar and operating without significant external scrutiny. They happened during one of the most intense periods of media attention the league has faced in years, and the optics were, to put it diplomatically, not great. Around the same time, the Sophie Cunningham story was picking up steam. A Wall Street Journal opinion piece surfaced that raised serious concerns about league culture and specifically referenced Caitlin Clark. The piece questioned how the league was managing player treatment and whether its internal standards were creating an environment that could be described as hostile or discriminatory. To be absolutely clear, these were opinion pieces and media commentary, not confirmed legal findings or verified investigations. Speculation was circulating in online spaces about potential federal scrutiny, but nothing of that nature has been officially confirmed or established as fact. But here's the thing about timing. It doesn't matter if every piece of speculation is unfounded. What matters is that when multiple serious media outlets are simultaneously questioning your league's culture, your leadership decisions, and your treatment of players, you cannot afford to be simultaneously fining a player for talking about her own experience. The two stories collided in the public consciousness and created something the league's communications team clearly wasn't prepared to handle. Fox News segments debated whether the WNBA was cultivating an environment where honest criticism is actively discouraged. Sports commentary channels that rarely touched women's basketball suddenly had strong opinions about WNBA governance. Political commentators, who were already engaged with the Caitlin Clark storyline for various reasons, folded the Sophie Fine story into their existing narratives about the league. The WNBA had become a story not just for sports journalists, but for culture writers, opinion columnists, and political commentators. And every single one of them was using the same piece of evidence as their anchor. The league had fined a player, multiple times, for speaking honestly about her experience. It's difficult to overstate how damaging this convergence was for the league's image, particularly among audiences it desperately needs to convert into long-term supporters. The WNBA is in a growth phase, record viewership numbers, increased sponsorship interest, a genuine cultural moment driven largely by Caitlin Clark's arrival and the attention she brought with her. All of that momentum exists right now. And instead of the headlines being about record attendance or exciting gameplay or the rising stars of the league, the dominant narrative in national media was about fines, silencing, double standards, and a league that appeared to be more focused on controlling its players' voices than improving the product on the court. That's a brutal trade-off, and it revealed something much deeper about the challenges the WNBA faces as it tries to grow, challenges that go far beyond one player and one fine. There's a concept in sports management research that doesn't get discussed nearly enough in public conversations about leagues and fan relationships. It's the idea that perceived unfairness is more damaging to long-term fan loyalty than almost anything else, including losing seasons, disappointing trades, or even scandal. Fans can forgive a bad team. They can accept rebuilding years. They can stomach controversy if they believe the institution handling it is doing so honestly and transparently. What they struggle to forgive is the feeling that the system is rigged, or even just that the people running things don't care about getting it right. Right now, a significant portion of the WNBA's audience is experiencing exactly that feeling. Not because of one TikTok or one podcast episode or one round of fines, but because Sophie Cunningham's story crystallized something that had been building quietly across multiple seasons of mounting frustration. The officiating concerns she raised weren't invented. Coaches, fans, analysts, and players have been expressing similar frustrations through various channels for years. The question of consistency, of whether the same standards are applied evenly across games, situations, and players, has been a recurring theme in WNBA commentary for longer than Sophie's fines have been in the news cycle. What Sophie did was give that frustration a human face and a specific story. And when the league responded with financial penalties rather than dialogue, it confirmed, at least in the minds of many watching, that the feedback loop between players and leadership was broken. That's a serious structural problem for a league trying to grow. Because growth in professional sports doesn't come from TV deals and sponsorship agreements alone. It comes from trust. From the sense that the league is being run by people who respect its players, value its fans, and are committed to getting things right, even when that means acknowledging mistakes. The WNBA is at an extraordinarily rare moment in its history. The wave of attention generated by Caitlin Clark's arrival has introduced millions of new viewers to the league. Many of those viewers came in with fresh eyes and no pre-existing opinions about WNBA governance or culture. What they observed during this period, fines for honest speech, perceived inconsistency in disciplinary action, a league that appeared defensive and reactive rather than transparent and proactive, will shape their impressions for years. First impressions in sports fandom are sticky, they're hard to reverse. So the question the league needs to be asking right now isn't how to handle Sophie Cunningham's next podcast episode. It's whether the patterns this situation exposed are going to be addressed, genuinely, substantively addressed, or whether the default response will continue to be containment and discipline. Because one path leads toward a league that earns the trust of a generation of new fans during the most important growth window it has ever had. And the other path leads somewhere much harder to come back from. Let's bring it all the way back. A 10-second TikTok, a podcast conversation, a general manager's public warning, fines that stacked up faster than anyone expected, and an entire league suddenly on the defensive. Sophie Cunningham didn't create this controversy. She uncovered one that was already there, buried under seasons of quiet frustration, inconsistent officiating debates, and a communication culture that seemed to prioritize silence over solutions. The WNBA is sitting on an extraordinary opportunity right now. More eyes on the game than ever before. More investment, more attention, more cultural relevance. But none of that matters if the foundation underneath it feels unstable to the people living inside it. Players speak when something feels wrong. Fans rally when they feel unheard. And media pays attention when the story is real. This story is real. So here's the question I'll leave you with. When the people who love the game most are penalized for saying so, what does that tell you about who the league is actually playing for? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I want to hear what you think. Subscribe to Simply Explained for more stories like this one. We'll see you in the next one.